What's your biggest regret?
Oh, wow. I don't know that I have any regrets. I mean, I honestly, because I wouldn't be who I am had I not been through what I've been through. Have I done a lot of wrong things? Yes. I mean, are a lot of things I wish I hadn't have done. Regret in general is saying that I would want to change something, and it's like, what would I change? I mean, life is what it is. I didn't have the memory of my dad. I don't know why this just came to mind, but when I was young, and my dad would beat my mom, my sister and I would be in their room listening through the wall, to the argument or whatever. And my dad caught us one time, and I'll never forget the time he grabbed me by the shirt and basically bounced me off the bed, told me, don't, do that kind of thing. Okay, well, that was an awful thing, but I wouldn't be who I am today had I not been through that.
Whimsicast. Unpredictable encounters with voices from the unknown.
My name is Orland. 51, originally from north of Detroit. Grew up in north of Chicago, and have lived in Richmond now 22 years. Richmond to me is very backwards than most of the places I've ever lived. But now, having been here 22 years, you live like everybody else. Mm-hmm. We're an hour and a half from many, many different things. So you're, of course, if nuclear war starts, this is not a good place to be. Zion was just a bad place. I mean, I couldn't wait to leave there. And it's like any place else. It's just a small town, nothing going on. Everybody had big dreams, but, nobody thought they'd actually achieve anything. You know, we were, 45 minutes north of Chicago, 45 minutes south of Milwaukee. And if you wanted to do anything, you went either to Milwaukee or Chicago because there was nothing in Zion,
Yeah. What was childhood like for you there?
Well, it was different. My parents were divorced when I was 8. So my parents, my original father was very abusive. He liked to drink a lot. He was a plumbing contractor. He was stuck in Zion is a very small town north of Chicago. It was set up by John Alexander Dowie to be a Christian community. And so I actually grew up on Emmaus Street. Our streets were Emmaus, Enoch, Eshcol, In the center of the city was the Christian Catholic Church, which was the church that he had set up. By the time I was growing up there, we were long from being a religious community. My father had grown up there and then had moved away and joined the Air Force. And while he was in the Air Force, outside of Selfridge Air Force Base in Michigan, he met my mom, got her pregnant, and ended up marrying her and getting out of the Air Force. So then they moved back to Chicago, to Zion. And, he didn't want to be married and all that to begin with. So then by the time I turned 8, he met his high school sweetheart, ran into her again, and they started an affair, and he broke it off with my mom. My mom then proceeded to start dating my baseball coach, and so my baseball coach became my stepfather.
And what was that like?
Very awkward. Through the whole time of the divorce and everything, there was, just violence and anger in the house all the time. My parents all drank. And my mom started, she'd come to the Little League and she'd bring jugs of wine. And her and the other mothers would sit up in the bleachers drinking wine while the kids were playing. And my coach at the time had asked her for, a glass of water. He thought it was water, and he found out it was wine. Well, then he asked her on a date, and, And so then it's rather awkward when your baseball coach shows up, all spruced up and smelling funny to take your mom out. Mm-hmm. Well, he ended up being somewhat abusive as well. When he drank scotch, he'd get a little bit violent. So, it's the mixing of these two families that always had these violence issues. I was the good kid for the most part. So,
what makes you say
well,
that?
I was a kid that didn't get in any trouble. I had the best grades in school, all that kind of stuff. In the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, I taught Sunday school there, was confirmed Lutheran, and then actually wanted to get in the ministry. And so, what was it, 7th grade, they put me up for going to a private boarding school for high school to study for the clergy. And so, that's part of where I was the good kid. I was the one that wanted to be involved in church and whatnot. So
Yeah.
Well, I went to 1 year at the St. Paul's College High in Concordia, Missouri. That was my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
It was part of a deal. My stepdad owed a bunch of back child support, and he was going to pay for my 4 years of high school at this private school in exchange for all the money he owed my mom. He changed the deal the second year, so I didn't get to go back the second year, but then went back to the regular high school the next 3 years. But I was actually kicked out of high school. I was suspended and finally expelled from high school and started college early.
I thought you were the good kid then.
Well, up till my sophomore year in high school.
Oh, okay. So what happened there?
Just a lot of stuff. The fact that I didn't want to be there my sophomore year. I mean, I wanted to be at this Christian school, and it just a lot of stuff. I mean, we had been taught all these things about drug users are bad people and blah blah blah, and I wanted to stop some of that stuff, and so I started working in a sense underground, making friends with a lot of these druggies and whatnot. And so I could turn them in or whatever. Well, I found out these were good people, that, all this stuff that these cops were making up was just lies. And so then I ended up rebelling and jumping into that side. And so I ended up leaving after I got expelled. I went to college for a little while, then moved to Denver, Colorado. My uncle was a frame carpenter. I worked for him for a while, then moved to Seattle where my dad had moved to.
So you went to work for him?
Yeah.
And how'd that go?
Again, interesting. He set up an import company, and then they sent me to Taiwan as a purchasing agent to get different supplies and stuff. And they messed up my reservation, and so they had overbooked, and I was in really, really late in this hotel at the Lai Lai Sheraton. And so I literally had the presidential suite, which was the top 2 floors of the Lai Lai Sheraton. And I walk into my room. I'm expecting a little box, for $100 a night or whatever. And I walk into this room, and I've got a spiral staircase that goes upstairs and a chandelier. I've got a dining room that seats like 12 people. Just an absolutely incredible room. You get upstairs to my bedroom, and it's a huge king-size bed. The jacuzzi that overlooked, the city of Taipei. That was
And you were 17.
I was 17.
So what did you
old.
do? What did you do with that space?
Well, this is what's really bad. My dad's partner said when you get to Taiwan, in the basement of the Lai Lai Sheraton, at the pharmacy down there, you can buy Valium over the counter. He said, get me a big bottle of Valium. So I bought this bottle of Valium, took a couple of Valiums, and I had bought some Jack Daniels that I got duty-free when I flew to Taipei. Had a shot of Jack Daniels, slept through the entire thing.
Hello, Whimsicast listeners. This is Steven Sanders, producer of Whimsicast. And I was just wondering if you guys had checked out the Facebook page yet, or the Instagram page, or perhaps the Twitter page. Whimsicast is on all 3 of those platforms. We're usually posting different stuff on all those things, so if you're into the show, the main reason I have those pages to begin with is so I can be in touch with you. So if you type in Whimsicast on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you're going to find us there. I was also really happy to receive 6 more iTunes reviews since the last show. If you haven't reviewed us yet, go ahead. And it doesn't even have to be a 5-star review. Maybe you think the show could be better in some way. That's the sort of thing that I'm looking forward to hearing back from you guys on. All right, anyways, let's get back to the story.
My dad had an opportunity to buy a hotel in Prescott, Arizona. He needed $100,000 to buy his portion of this $4 million hotel. So basically, he sold off the imports. He sold everything he could and raised up the $100,000 to purchase the hotel. So he's been doing that ever since. I haven't spoken to him in 22 years. So.
Oh wow, why is that?
Well, I have this problem with capitalism as a general thing.
Sure.
He just loves money. loves money over anything and everything. And we just didn't see my future in the same
Sure.
light, I guess you'd say.
Got you. So once he sold the trading company and he started this hotel venture in Arizona, what did you end up doing after that?
Actually, I embezzled $21,000 out of the hotel over a 6-month period. I had a small cocaine problem at the time.
Did you get rid of the cocaine problem after the first try, or did it
Well,
take
I mean,
a while, or?
Well, I won't say I never did cocaine after that, but it's like, I mean, I was three days on the floor. You know, my liver had gone completely jaundiced. I was bright yellow. I kind of lost the taste for that sort of thing.
I guess that'll do it.
Yeah.
So once you got better, what happened after that?
I moved to North Carolina. My stepdad needed false teeth. It was a lot cheaper to get false teeth in South Carolina than in Chicago.
Sure.
I mean, literally, it was a couple $100s there, and it was like thousands of dollars in Chicago. So they found out they could take a vacation, go to South Carolina, and get his false teeth, and come back, and it'd be cheaper than just buying the teeth in Chicago. And on that trip, they stopped in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and they absolutely fell in love with it. You know, it's 200 year-round residents, you know, in the middle of the Smoky Mountains and the Blue Ridge Parkway. And so they lived there for 10 years, 15 years. And it was during that time that I caught up with them there.
Okay. So how long were you there?
On and off, 5 years, I guess.
Man, you're you've been around, haven't you?
Well, from there I went to Atlanta and then to South Florida. Got back into crack down there.
Gotcha.
So not to shooting up like I was before, but anyway. Yeah.
Sure.
Still not good. Woke up one day and the Miami Herald had the top 6 drug neighborhoods of all South Florida, and ours was one of them.
Okay.
And so we decided that day it was time to leave, and so we left there. Headed back to the mountains, but
gotcha. Who is we?
A roommate that I picked up in Atlanta.
Okay.
He went to work for Miller Mechanical as well. And we went down there, and actually ended up driving up to. He was from Wheaton, Pennsylvania. And we ended up going up there, and there was absolutely nothing up there. So ended up back in Maggie Valley.
Yeah. Okay. So Maggie Valley, Atlanta, Marietta, South Florida, back to Maggie Valley, and then what? Tell me more.
And then Richmond.
Okay, so you've been in Richmond ever since.
And I've been in Richmond 22 years. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. What made you stay here?
Well, I felt the Lord was telling me to get ready for my spouse, and so I started reading a lot of books about codependency and dealing with those issues. In November of that year, I visited one of the churches in town for the first time. And that night, the lady who's now my wife was running the new members ministry.
Gotcha.
And so we ended up getting engaged 3 weeks later and married nine months later, I think.
It's Steven again, and I wanted to invite you all to check out our SoundCloud page, specifically the Whimsicast Season 1 soundtrack. This playlist includes all the music from all the fantastic producers that have allowed me to use this music in the podcast. Quite frankly, I've been blown away by how many people have contributed to this project. If you're enjoying the podcast right now, trust me when I tell you that it would not be anywhere as good as it is without this music. Do me a favor, check out the SoundCloud page by searching Whimsicast. If you hear a song that you like, download or purchase that song. It would really mean a lot. Now, back to the story.
Everything, I guess, really started in 2005. And it was funny. At the time, I had just turned 40. And the whole thing is life begins at 40. And you've said that your entire life, and now you're there, and what are you going to do? And I mean, I wasn't looking for anything, but at 40, I had my first trip to go on a missions trip to India. And I went on the first trip, which was, I think, a 10-day trip. And we did physical work in some orphanages and stuff in India. It was my first trip to a place of such poverty. I mean, I'd been to Mexico, Juarez, Mexico, and it's different. The poverty that we saw in India was just unbelievable. But the people were happy. And it was a different thing, you know, and it's like in the world that we live in here, it's like we've got so much stuff and nobody's happy. And there they've got nothing and they are so happy. These little kids are just wonderful. So I fell in love with India because my father had done the imports, wanted to try to do an import business to try to raise money. Barnabas is our contact in Chennai, India. He actually lives in a slum in Chennai, and he serves the people of the slums basically his whole life. Barnabas said that he wanted to feed 1,000 kids every day, and I thought that was an amiable chore. So we thought we would join hands with him to help him do that. We brought the import stuff back. I had also started a construction company about the same time. And it was easier for me to make money doing construction than to try to set up this import company. And so the construction company took off, and we set up feeding projects. And we got to the point where we were feeding 240 kids 6 days a week. It was about $1,500 a month. And the business was doing that with no problem. Did that for 2 years until the money dried up, and then there was nothing. And so we had to stop all of that. In the process of all this soul searching, we had wrongly believed that God wanted us to be wealthy, and as long as we're helping and everything, it didn't matter how much we kept for ourselves. And what we found out, or what we believe now, is that God wants to prosper us, and He doesn't want us to go without. But at the same time, it's about need, not greed. And He's shown us how much extra we have to be able to share with people that don't have anything. And in the years of we closed down the business. We thought we were going to lose everything. We spent 3 years just searching Scripture, not listening to any preachers, not listening to anything. And it was just us and the Word of God. And after 3 years, it's like, oh, well, now it makes sense. It took 3 years to get to the point where we didn't have to hear what everybody else said that the stuff meant. It means what it says, and it's pretty simple. And so once we got to that point, we were ready for everything to disappear. And we were thinking, what's our worst case scenario? And we figured we're going to end up in my father-in-law's basement. It's like, okay, well, that's not too bad. We can make a life out of it. It's no big deal. And then everything stopped. They didn't repossess anything else. They stopped threatening letters. It was like as soon as we gave up in our minds that none of this was ours anymore, then we got to keep it all, which is just really weird. Well, in the process of this, I met a lady in Pakistan who works with the slave children. And her name is Bida Yaqub, and she's a school teacher in Faisalabad, Pakistan, a public school teacher. And she makes $300 a month, and I found out that she would spend her weekends out of the slave colonies. And I started learning about this entire process of how people become slaves and how many millions of people around the world are in physical slavery even today. The people that she works with mostly make bricks. And I've got videos of these kids, 5-year-old kids, who make bricks from sunup to sundown 7 days a week. And that's their entire life. And some of these are fourth-generation slaves. So their parents, their grandparents grew up as slaves and died as slaves. And so many of them only owe a few $100s. We found out that we could pay off these debts, and so we started doing that. And so in the process of all of this, it's finding out that I don't need to be a business. I don't need to be any of that for the Lord to use me to do whatever He wants to do. And it doesn't matter, be it hard times or easy times or whatever, that God is in control and that God loves us. And so if it's a bad thing or something that we perceive as bad, is He chastening us? Is there something that we need to learn? Because the problem's not on His side. So He promised if we do His will that He would give us peace and safety in these things. And so if we're not having those things, then we need to figure out what we're doing, to, I don't want to say appease God, because it's not like that, but it's just understanding that I don't need to worry about it. You look at the lives of the apostles and how rough their lives were, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so easy. We have it so easy. And so now my job, if you will, I plant, fell back, and once the business went out, I turned the yard into a garden so that we can cut back costs as much as we can. And so we produce as much food as we can. We have chickens. We have lots of food to give away. We give away lots of stuff to neighbors. We have a share garden. And it's just this thing about stop letting money rule. It's people are always asking, well, how much for this and how much? And it's like, no, it's, God made the food. Here, help yourself. And it's just a different mindset towards everything. Another thing that we're doing is with a gentleman I met in South Carolina. gentleman named Bryant King. He's homeless in Columbia, South Carolina. 3 years ago, we had been friends on Facebook for a while. And 3 years ago, he had a problem with his leg. And so we invited him up to Richmond. And he came up and stayed with us for a month, just kind of heal and whatnot. And he talked about this idea called Homeless EcoVille. And the concept is basically providing tiny houses, a couple hundred square foot, for a homeless person to actually live in, and then providing them with enough land to plant some food, sticking solar panels on the roof so that the power needs are all met. The concept is a way to get rid of end homelessness, with people that are willing to do that sort of thing. A couple years ago, we set up homelessecoville.com, which is the website, to promote the idea. And this last year, we actually started building houses in our backyard. And so we have one house now, which we call the big house. We've got some pallets and stuff set up now. So for the winter, we can easily house a couple more people in tents. We've got space for that. But we have enough room in our yard. We think we can easily do 5 houses in our backyard. Under city guidelines, we can do 5 sheds in our backyard that we don't mind letting our friends take naps in. So that's what we're doing.
Very interesting.
Also trying to do a greenhouse. I've got old windows, so we want to build a greenhouse to provide, food year round. The climate in Virginia, we don't get snow till December. And you might have a month or two of really, really hard temperatures, but a small heater, in a greenhouse could take care of that. So
what's the goal after that?
We'd like to see Homeless EcoVille go all over the place. And there's people that have talked about it. And I was a general contractor for a number of years, so I know how to do blueprints and that sort of thing. And our tentative plan was based on a 5-acre lot where we could easily house, I think it was like 36 tiny houses, and still have plenty of land for food and, animals and whatnot. The problem is finding people that have land or money that want to actually do this. I mean, a tiny house might only cost a couple $1,000s, to put somebody in a decent place to live, which is much cheaper than keeping them on the streets. But, finding people that want to invest in that, it seems like society is much more interested in punishing the homeless than helping them out. So we're kind of doing it underground because we've seen for a long time where all this is going. Every year it gets worse. There's more homeless on the streets. The prices are going up. The wages are not. We end up with more homeless on the streets of Richmond every weekend. It seems like the more you drive, the more homeless you see begging on the street corners. And so we know that that's coming. And it's not going to get better. Placing 5 billionaires in charge of the U.S. economy is not going to help. So with that having been said, we're doing what we need to do in our backyard to help as many people as we can. The Lord will bring who he wants, and so I'm just moving forward. I truly believe that the Lord is coming back. I don't know when, but I do know that I will be busy when he comes back, working on whatever hasn't been done yet.
How can the average American do their part in changing the world?
Learn to share more. We've got plenty. One of the biggest industries right now in the U.S. is building storage units. Why? I mean, if you don't need it, get rid of it. But instead of sharing, we hoard more and more stuff, and people are hurting. There's something, 1,600 billionaires on our planet. We have 1,600 billionaires, and still more than 21,000 children starve to death every single day. 21,000 every single day because they can't get 50 cents to eat. It's deplorable. So like our part, we revolt against it. We give away food. We give away as much food as we can, and that saves people money. Why do they have to keep slaving for all this stuff? It's like, here, eat for free, and just share.
You don't live a typical lifestyle. What drives you?
The Lord. I just love the Lord so much. I just many nights I'll get up at 2-3 a.m. and just read scripture, and I'll tell you, the worse things get, the more encouraged I get. And I know that sounds so completely backwards, but it's like, I've been doing this I was 13 when I met the Lord, and at 51, it's, a long time. And you start thinking, is this stuff true or not? Yeah, it's a good idea. And I know how I feel about the Lord, and I know my conversations with him. But it's like you still look around and say, well, what's really going to happen? Well, things are really getting bad. Things are really getting crazy. And I just read certain scriptures. Daniel 8:27 talks about a cruel king who will come, who tells lies, who talks about how powerful and great he is. And I just watch the headlines and go, oh, this is happening quite literally right before our eyes. And to me, it's fascinating. It's like, okay, I can taste the other side, because how much worse can it get? I mean, right now, as of today, we've got a major hurricane that's destroying the Caribbean right now. After the last 3 that destroyed the Caribbean in the last 2 months, how many wildfires are going crazy out west? 1,200 people were destroyed by a tsunami in India. This is our world right now. And I believe in a just God, and I believe in a God that keeps his word. And he talks about a time when, it's like if we're doing his will, he calms the storms. He does these things. He gives you a place to live and keeps it calm. When it's going like this, it's chastising. He's saying, wake up, change your mind. You're going in the wrong direction. And as bad as it gets, it just gives me that much more encouragement that it's actually going to come true. The whole nine, a new heaven, new earth. Won't remember this place anymore, and it's fine. I'm over it. I'm ready to go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Whimsicast, produced by Stephen R. Sanders. For more episodes of Whimsicast, go ahead and subscribe on iTunes or Google Play. You can also find us on Spreaker. Thanks.